later today because it's Sunday. And happy Mother's Day, by the way, to everyone. And even if you're not the mother of a human, happy Mother's Day if you are a pet mother. We had a hummingbird that just had a baby, so now I'm a pet grandmother. So thank you so much for being here. If this is the first time you're seeing me, I'm Chef AJ, and I created these daily lives the day after the sheltering in place began, just to create a sense of community and connection. And most of the time I interview people within my field of work, meaning plant-based doctors or plant-based chefs. But every now and then I like to bring on a guest that is somebody that has been very important to my life. If you watch me regularly, you know you've heard from my stand-up comedy teacher, you've heard from my Reiki master, you've heard from my pet psychic, you even heard from the Reverend who married me. And so now my very favorite teacher, oh, I hope the comedy teacher doesn't hear this, not that I said that, but he is, because it's not because I like him better necessarily, but because what he teaches. So if I could have been anything in life, I would have been an improvisational comedy actor like at the Groundlings, but I started really late. I didn't even get into it till I was 25. And if I had had this gentleman as my teacher then, instead of just about 2 years ago, I could have been somebody. His name is Patrick Bristow, and we've put his bio in the show notes, and it's very long and extensive. You might remember him from a very famous Seinfeld episode with the wigs. I remember seeing him for the first time on the original Ellen show that I think was called These Friends of Mine, even a long time ago. But he is my improvisational comedy teacher, and he actually lives somewhat near me now, and it's been my dream to get him to teach out here. And he's going to be talking about not just his career, but about how improvisation, what we do, is a skill for life. So please welcome my friend and teacher, Mr. Patrick Bristow. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing good. Thank you, AJ. I'm really happy to be here.
This is such an honor. I've never really interviewed like a movie star before.
And you still haven't.
I love that. You have such a self-deprecating sense of humor. How did you first get into improv in general and then to become a teacher at the Groundlings? That's amazing.
Well, I guess the short answer is in 1986, I started taking classes at the Groundlings, and I was totally bit by the bug. I loved it. I was one of those actors that didn't really fit in to a lot of projects and roles that were written. So the great thing about improv is you cast yourself. Basically, you create your own character. And working with partners, you create your own reality. So it's like being a writer and performer at the same time in a lot of ways. So it was just a good match for me. And I went through the classes, and then I became a member in the company. And I was there from 88 to 94, 89 to 94, and started teaching and being trained to teach there. And pretty quickly found that I actually liked teaching better than acting.
That's really interesting that you found that out.
Yeah.
But if you weren't such a good actor, maybe you wouldn't be such a good teacher.
Oh, Lord Almighty. All right. Have you seen Showgirls?
Actually, that's so funny because the star of that was in my acting class when it came out. I remember. Yeah, it wasn't the best movie I've seen, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a delightful disaster. But anyway, I found it fun to impart what I learned on stage and working with other people and observing other improvisers and imparting that to people who are learning improv. And to this day, I still use a few of the phrases that I developed early or stole, I don't remember. But one was that, the dirty little secret of improv is that we all know how to do it already. And you've been doing it since you were born. I mean, when it really comes down to it, improv isn't what you see on Whose Line Is It Anyway, or at an improv show or something that they're using improv, but it really is just, it's part of our makeup as human beings, as animals. We respond to unexpected stimuli, and we respond in a range of, somewhat predictable, ways. And that's kind of what improv is. It's getting out of your way and being open and receptive and allowing that, turn into a reaction. So, we've been doing it forever. You do it all the time. You do it in every conversation. You do it when you're walking through traffic. If we weren't yes-anding the world around us, we wouldn't survive in it.
Actually, Jill just wrote, yes, and it's like she's obviously taken a class. You know, it's true because I think in life you can't plan, you can try to plan things, but it doesn't always go your way. And I think improv teaches you to be flexible because you might have an idea that you think is the greatest idea in the world, and then you get on stage and the partner has another idea and you have to let it go.
Yeah, you have to let yours go unless yours can weave in and marry it, very organically. But you have to accept your partner's creation as the reality from where you're working. This is what we're dealing with, whether it's what I wanted or not. In my head, it's what is true for that moment. So just like in life, you deal with what is true in that moment, whether it's somebody else's behavior or a circumstance you find yourself in. And that's the yes of yes and. A lot of people think, oh, I have to agree with everything. So if you and I were doing an improv scene and I said, I want you to saw your own head off. Of course, it would probably be hilarious to watch you try. But your character only has to agree with the fact that I asserted that. You don't have to actually necessarily do it. Some improv teachers, would say, yes, you have to. And yes, generally is better than no. I mean, almost always. But if I say, what a beautiful wedding gown you're wearing, and you're going, I hate it, it's hideous. That's not a denial. That's your character's opinion. So sometimes yes, of the yes and when we start classes, gets taken very, very seriously. And that's okay, especially in the beginning, because you're just working to accept another person's point of view, another person's take on reality. And that's challenging enough. And then the and part is our responsibility to add something to it, and that's the reaction aspect. And when it's its best, we're not thinking so much about what are my options here. We're just reacting like we would reflexively in any circumstance. And that's when you get that chain reaction going between improvisers. It's absolutely magical because the scene feels like it's writing itself, like you're channeling it almost. It's coming from your own knowledge, your own subconscious, your own, values, emotions, whatever. But it's happening a little bit faster sometimes than you can think about it the way you would when you write. If you think about it when you're writing something and you go back and look at a paragraph and you go, what's something's wrong with that? And you evaluate it and you go, oh, I know, I'm being too vague. And then you go back in and fix it. That analytical kind of part of the brain is not so welcome in improv. We have to keep it under good governance. So, I'm getting all heavy now.
Well, no, but like even like when you think about when people have a conversation with people, a lot of times, not even in the context of improv, they're not really fully present. They're not really listening. They're thinking about what they're going to say. And in improv, you can't do that.
No, you can't, or you'll miss the moment. And the moment is everything. Everything hinges on the moment. And if you're doing improv for an audience, they're sitting there in their relaxed, plush seats without the spotlight on them. And because they're relaxed, they notice everything. So if you're not present, like you just said, and you miss the moment, the audience sees you miss the moment. Whether they actually think, wow, he's not really present, or they just go, that didn't work. They see the result of you not being in the moment. And as improvisers, while we're improvising, we have to be the most awake people in the room. We have to not just hear with our ears, but we have to hear with our feelings and our eyes and our bodies. So it gets a little ooky spooky, if you want to go there with it. But it's a very holistic kind of listening and reception. I'll say to people in my classes that we have the responsibility of being good, clear broadcasters and good, clear receivers constantly at the same time, back and forth. As you were saying what you were saying just now, and I was listening, I did have a couple little Post-its go off in my head. And that's a little bit different than, just thinking like, okay, when they're done, I get to say my bit. Because you're still present with them. You're just clocking like, oh, okay, I see what she said. I'm going to remember to bring up this point. And the point I was going to bring up when you were talking about people not listening is what I call paraphrase listening, where you hear the shape of what they're saying, but you don't hear the heart of it. I mean, we do that all the time in life. We have to go, I'm sorry, what did you just say? And we got the shape of what they said. It was something about like, don't start the car until the jumper cables are attached. But wait a minute, what? but we didn't really listen. And then a car explodes and somebody dies, and that's terrible.
Well, I think improv is just a good training for life in general. As I mentioned to you once, I had a cousin who worked for an ad agency in Chicago, and he would send his copywriters to Second City, not to become actors, but to become better copywriters.
Oh, I can imagine. And I think Second City is one of those types of improv schools that's probably absolutely perfect for that. I think they've turned out a lot of really smart, clever writers, and it's something that's being used more and more in a lot of different businesses, not just for writers, but for team building. You know, it's been a cliche for a while that, you know, on a corporate retreat they bring in an improv teacher, and all the sales managers from the district have to do some exercises so they learn how to bond with each other. I don't know how successful that usually is.
Have you ever done the corporate retreats or anything?
Yeah, I have done, and I've walked away from some going, okay, I think they got something. I think I was able to translate some points to them, and then I've walked away from others going like, this is not going to work. I did not help them. You know, they hand me my check, and I'm like, all right, I almost feel guilty cashing it, but I do.
Good for you.
But I actually found that working with lawyers, I could either have the best or the worst results. And one is because lawyers, many, not all, I think, but some are really trained to listen forensically. They're listening for what doesn't add up. They're listening for that glitch, that flaw in your argument. They're listening for the opportunity. They're listening for something that they can address, you know, through their legal knowledge. So they can be really good listeners, but sometimes I have found that there are some breeds of lawyers who, because they're a little bit contrarian in nature, it was harder for them to accept what the other person was giving them unquestioningly. Because their evaluation gland is, you know, running high all the time. They're always evaluating. So it's kind of interesting. They, you know, with all the years they spend, you know, mastering their skills, some of it can really be useful for improv, and some can provide a challenge.
I never understood why it wasn't more popular, because I guess not everyone lives in a place like LA where they can go see live improv like at the Groundlings.
Mhm.
But to me, it's funner than any kind of movie or show or experience you can have, not just doing it, but actually watching it.
Well, it's so immediate. I mean, it's like watching, you know, an acting version of a high wire act without a net. There's always the chance they are going to fall, and fall hard. And anytime they do something that actually works, because the audience is with them, they want them to succeed for the most part. And so, you know, little victories are thrilling to watch, because we know how risky it is now, and you know how difficult it can be, especially under the tension of performance.
I think even people that are accomplished actors are afraid of improv.
Yeah, so weird to me. I get it. I get why they're afraid. And there's a lot of different reasons people can be afraid of improv. One is if they have that message in their head that they're not funny. They've just always been told, oh, don't make jokes, you're not funny, or you're not a funny person. And then they get self-conscious. Well, that's going to be a little bit of a roadblock to them getting up in a group and doing an improv where, you know, the goal probably is to create a funny scene with a funny character and, you know, a funny result, though it doesn't always have to be. So that's one block, is that self-talk of I'm not funny. And another one is the risk of looking foolish. People that have very controlled image that they put out, difficult, you know, to look ugly or possibly look ignorant or stupid, or, you know, all the things that generally make us human and sometimes make us laugh in identification. You know, we laugh with somebody who's being foolish because, man, we probably have been that way too. So yeah, a lot of people, even experienced actors, you're right, have a phobia about improv.
That's amazing. It's funny because I take both improv with you and stand-up comedy with Carrie. And when I try to cross-pollinate, when I try to get the people in the improv class to take the stand-up, I was only able to get one. And when I try to get the people in the stand-up to take improv, they don't, it's like almost like they don't want to do anything other than the one modality that they're used to.
You know, I can completely relate to that because um, I was afraid to do stand-up. I found the clubs a really hostile environment back in the 80s and 90s, and it didn't feel like a particularly gay-friendly environment many times. And anytime I wrote stuff that was going to be kind of stand-up, a week later I'd look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's horrible! Thank God I didn't go to an open mic night with that. It's not your skill, Patrick." So I get that. Put me on stage without a script, I'll take a chance, fine. But over the years, because I host improv shows as well, and I host one for the Jim Henson Company called Puppet Up Uncensored, I'm functioning as the show's MC, and there's a little tiny stand-up element to that. So I have some patter and some, standard material I use, during transitions for the show. And then I interact with the audience often, well, totally improvisationally, because I never know what they're going to do. So I've gotten a little over the fear of standing there with a mic. That's as close to stand-up, I think, as I will get. So yeah, it's not for everybody, but improv, unlike stand-up, I think offers some social skills benefits in terms of being able to connect to people and being able to curb your impulse to talk and increase your impulse to listen and to really listen, to allow the moment to be unstructured, to not be afraid of the silences. That's why I think improv is good for people that don't even ever want to set foot on a stage or do it in public. I get it.
That's probably why the Groundlings offered like 3 classes of improv for non-actors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they realized years ago that there was a need for that, They would get people that came into the regular classes and they weren't interested in moving up the ladder towards potential company membership. They weren't interested in moving up the ladder to take the writing classes or the classes where you perform at the end of the course. They just loved the process. And I think that's how the workshops at the Groundlings, the workshops A, B, and C were created for those people. And they've been very popular.
How can regular people, like people watching, I mean, there's a few people on it that are actors and they're saying they love improv. Jill's saying it's perfect release because she's a shy introvert, and
Totally.
we don't have access to a lot of improv in this country unless you're living in New York, Chicago, LA kind of thing.
I think you might be surprised. There's not often a lot of varied improv offerings in any given city, but I know in Minneapolis, I believe it is what they call the huge theater. There's in Atlanta, you've got Dad's Garage, and you've got the Basement Theater, and there's great improv, schools and theaters out there all over the place. Got Bay Area Theater Sports in San Francisco. So there actually are more now, AJ, and it's great. But I think you have to find what fits you, because you might go to one school and you just don't feel it's a right match with you and the other students because of maybe all the other students are too young, and you feel like the grandpa in there, or vice versa. So I think you have to try out a few that are within driving distance of where you live, and they're out there, but you have to look for them.
Well, Sylvan said that there's an improv meeting for seniors in Flagstaff, Arizona. That sounds amazing because
Awesome.
there's so many seniors here. I would love to get something like that started, because I think when people do it, even if they're afraid, it's just, even if they're not trying to do scenes, just some of the games that you play for warm up, they're just really fun.
They're really fun. And they create a fun sense of community within the group. And they actually work parts of the brain that the rest of your day probably doesn't work. So they're very stimulating and a great way to blow off steam. I would say that for anyone who is a non-actor, and hasn't been, let's say, through, conservatory type acting classes where, you get a lot of feedback. Some of it's hard to take. If you haven't been a ballet dancer where you've got a lot of feedback, some of it's hard to take. I'd say go out and find an improv class that really is geared for non-professionals, or find one of the schools and teachers, and they are out there, that purposely really are committed to creating an accepting, fun, loose atmosphere. Like in my classes, the first tell everyone, I go, who's nervous? And show of hands. And I always go, me too. And I've been doing this for, decades. You always have a suck pass in my class. All right. And the suck pass is invisible. You have it in your back pocket. And if you go up and you do terrible, if you do a horrible job, you get to use your suck pass. Who cares?
I wish we had a suck pass for like everything in life, like maybe like when the police pulled us over and
a suck pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Patrick gave me this suck pass, officer, so you got to let me off.
Maybe we shouldn't use suck passes when it can involve life and death. Like, I don't think I want my surgeon to have a suck pass. But, if we're just doing make-em-ups, if we're just playing games, then yeah, I think a suck pass is important.
Oh, that is so funny. Laurel says the teaching requires lots of improv, but her teaching online cuts it off. As a teacher, remote teaching is killing me.
Oh, what is she teaching remotely?
She teaches art actually at the college level.
Oh, okay. Yeah, translating a 3D in-person experience to this 2D box is really challenging. I feel her pain. I've been doing my Wednesday night classes with my regular class on Zoom, and some things don't work at all. Some things kind of work better in a way. So it's really unlocking what are the gifts of the limitation. The challenges of it, they present themselves pretty quickly. But art, I can't imagine. I mean, like, what, people are like holding up, something and going like, here's my sculpture. How does it look? And she has to deal with that.
Yeah. That's why I never understand these online cooking classes, because as somebody that went to culinary school, I know you could probably teach somebody how to cut a knife, but part of the thing in culinary school was that the teachers would come over and they would taste it to make sure that it was correct.
Yeah, I mean, and how do you work around that?
Yeah, I don't know how they do it with these online cooking classes. Taste it. Maybe they're looking for a look or something, but that just, yeah. Well, that's a whole new world now. Are there any just like, I think kids would probably love improv because they're already doing it even without knowing it.
Yeah. I've taught kids over the years. It's not something I seek out doing, but I've been in a few situations where I had to. My mom had a ballet school out here in the desert, and every year pretty much we would do an improv workshop one day where I would teach the young dancers some improv principles, and they weren't completely applicable to what they were doing in such a regimented discipline as ballet. But what I found was that, especially around like middle school, they get very self-conscious. That's the age you don't want to look uncool. Some of them don't mind, the class clowns, but a lot of people, you had to really make it super safe for them. The other thing about little kids and improv is, like you said, they do it all the time. It's no big deal. When we did our Puppet Up show before it was uncensored, and we just did it, we did it for families at the Edinburgh Festival in 2006 or 7 or something. And people were bringing like preschoolers and first and second graders. And the kids were not taken with the show at all. The parents were having a good time, but the kids weren't. And I realized, this is nothing to them. They do this all the time. They're not going, oh, you're an adult who's got social pressures on you and you're willing to look foolish in front of other adults. Little kids don't get that. So the high wire act is completely lost on them. They just want good entertainment, or they just want you just to wiggle the puppets in front of them and make a high voice, and they'd be fine with that too. But improv and kids, it's its own beast.
Maybe you could, because you've mentioned it twice, and I know what it is, but I'm not sure if everybody knows what Puppet Up is, because you're like the creator. And before I left LA, I had a
Co-creator.
bucket list. There were things that, even though I lived in LA most of my life, there were things I just never did, like go to the Science Museum. And so I made sure I went to Puppet Up before I left. And I'm not just saying this, to blow smoke up your butt, but it was the best live show. And I've been to Vegas and I've been to Broadway. There is nothing that I can think of that is like Puppet Up. It's so unique and it's so hilarious. And maybe you could tell people what it is and when it is, because who knows, might be people coming to LA or living in LA.
Yeah, when we're allowed to again, yeah. Puppet Up basically was co-created by myself and Brian Henson, Jim Henson's son. And Brian wanted to bring improv skills into his stable of comedic puppeteers that he used a lot, and that he hired for different Henson projects. So I taught a class for about 6 weeks, and they were loving it and they were doing great. And I said we should do a little performance maybe at lunchtime for the other employees of the studio. And Brian took the ball and ran with it. Next thing I knew, we were scheduled next month to do an evening performance on the soundstage at Henson, which is the old Charlie Chaplin lot. And they rented, like 200-seat bleachers, and they had cameras and sound and everything. I'm like, oh my God, I was just talking about like a little, casual brown bag lunch demonstration in the courtyard. Well, it got seen by some people from the Aspen Comedy Festival, and they said, bring the show there. And we said, it's not really a show, but okay. And then we got seen by the Edinburgh Festival at Aspen, and it just one thing led to another. So here's what Puppet Up Uncensored is now. It's a 2-hour show where you get to see Henson level puppeteers who are also fabulous, funny, wicked improvisers doing Henson puppetry, that technique, that style, making up sketches on the spot based on audience suggestions. No kids are allowed. So as you can imagine, it gets kind of adult. We don't try to go smutty, but the situations that the puppets find themselves in and some of the puppet characters are decidedly, after prime time. They're late night TV. They might even be rated R. And occasionally there's an X moment, but we try not to do that. So anyway, it's a really fun show. It's like nothing you'll see. And you don't just get to see the puppets, you're actually seeing the whole puppeteer. So you're either watching the show up on giant screens where you just see the puppets like you're used to for, Sesame Street and stuff, or you see the puppeteers standing on stage holding those puppets above their head, interacting with each other. So it is a very unique show. It's hard to describe. It's not Avenue Q. I guess it's somewhere between Saturday Night Live, Whose Line, and Moment Chance, Blue Man Group. I don't know.
It was absolutely, I still think about how good it was.
Thank you.
There's different forms of improv though. There's long form, there's short form. And I've never gravitated towards the long form, either as a participant or as an audience member, because I guess I like that hit of dopamine that you get from the quick laugh that you get on the short form improv.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are different, obviously styles and schools between, within rather, short form or long form. I specialize in short form. That's what I was trained in. That's what I know. And then I also do narrative long form, which would be an improvised play or an improvised movie, something that takes multiple scenes to tell a story. But the Chicago style short form where people clap in and, change the subject based on what they just saw, like they'll get a tangential idea and they go off to a different world and then someone else claps in after that little vignette and we're back at the original scene, but 2 hours later. That kind of weaving in and out of stuff is fantastic when it's done well. Oh my God, it's fantastic. I am a little too high strung, I think, to do it. I've done it a few times. I've done okay, but the toll on my central nervous system by the end of it was maybe not worth it. It was too hard. I can't think like that. So it's good to know one's limitations, but I'm glad that I tried it, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to do it.
Do you miss performing improv? Because you were a guest the night that Lisa Kudrow was at the Groundlings, and you're not performing it regularly now, but you were as good as, I mean, it was just some of the best improv I've ever seen. You created such rich and disparate characters that one night, and I don't think you're performing shows a lot doing improv. So is it like riding a bike? Is once you learn it, it never leaves you?
Well, thank you, first off. To a degree, yeah, to a degree it is. You have all those memories of when it went well and what that felt like and what you did and what you didn't do. And you don't have to really consciously think of it, if you've been doing it for a long time. You just have to recommit to it. But I think it's really important, no matter whether someone is improvising every night for an audience or once every 5 years, to check in with yourself always, because you are your instrument. So you have to check in with yourself before you're even going to the theater to perform, and go, am I joyous, focused, and relaxed? And if I'm not, can I get into that zone by the time I'm performing? Because if you're not all those three things at once, in my opinion, at least for me and what I've noticed for a lot of my students, you're probably not going to have as successful a time with it. And when you have a paying audience, you owe them, your A game, or as close to it as you can possibly bring. So yeah, I think the night you saw where I was the guest and we improvised with Lisa Kudrow, who's a Groundlings alum as well. We got into that zone, that joyous, focused, and relaxed zone where it's like, we're not afraid. We're actually excited to see what the night brings. Maybe a new character will be born. Maybe, one scene will just be absolutely historic and one of the ones that people talk about for years. Maybe we'll just have a really good time. Maybe the audience will feel like they got double their money's worth. There's always the potential for it to be just very fabulous and gratifying. And then staying relaxed is super important. And that's my challenge. Because if you're not really relaxed and you have any kind of fear and anxiety going on, it's going to get in the way of how well you can react and how present you can be in the moment, to bring it back to that. So it's really super important to be relaxed. And I think people that are nervous about taking an improv class need to realize that a lot of the warm-ups that you do and a lot of the exercises you do help you get to that place. And it's a fun journey to get from coming in frenzied after your work day, you wolf down some dinner, your class is at 7:00, you get there and you're trying to kind of get yourself focused and everything. And it should be a fun process getting yourself into that zone so that maybe by, I don't know, 7:15, 7:16, you're like, all right, I'm here. The rest of the world is gone. Here's where I am. And it's fabulous. And that's
when I was 25, I was trying to break into commercials, and it was the first time I tried any acting, and a casting director, it was the one that told me to take an improv class. Yeah. Because she said improvisation is the finest training ground for any type of actor, but particularly an actor who does commercials. And because my first entry into acting was improv, it's almost like everything else I didn't like as much. And what I've noticed is, like, when I do stand-up in a class, it's not that fun, because it seems like stand-up is dependent on the audience. But if I do improv in your class, even if we're all up on stage and there is no audience, I'm always having a good time doing improv.
Oh, great. Good. And I get that, it's the excitement of anything can happen. And when we're dealing with a written set that we've done, or we're dealing with the script, it's not anything can happen. It's these things are going to happen. Yeah. And then occasionally, if we're allowed to improvise or allowed to follow something that occurs naturally, then anything can happen, even in scripted material. I find the challenge with scripted material is I still have to get myself fooled into that anything can happen feeling, even though it's prescripted, it's already pre-scripted, written out, so that I can stay in the moment as if it's an improv. And that's one of the challenges of transferring some of the gifts of improv to scripted material. Improv was used a lot as a rehearsal technique before it became a performance discipline, in modern times at least. So if you were having trouble with a scene or a relationship or the memory of something, you would do an improv during rehearsal, guided by the director, to create that memory of your bar mitzvah that went crazy, or to create that horrible breakup that you have to refer to and kind of relive, in the scripted scene. So it was a really useful, and continues to be useful, tool for rehearsing scripted work. It also, with Spolin, Viola Spolin, was used to help children with emotional difficulties to express themselves and to act out things and to connect to other people. So it had a therapeutic application too. And again, this is before it became, this performance discipline of its own, at such a wide level as it is now. I will say that, back in like the late Middle Ages, I think, early Renaissance, the players in Italy, the commedia players that would go out from town to town and do their plays, those plays weren't written down. They were stories that everyone knew, and everyone knew the beats of the story. Pantalone does this and Capitano does that, the stock comedy characters, and then they improvised within that. So, improv has been around as long, as man has in some form, but the way that, we're doing it now, or the ways we're doing it now, where people actually come and watch it and expect an evening of entertainment, that's relatively new, I think.
Yeah. Gina says, those of us most scared to do it probably need to do it the most. Well, I've always heard that if you don't do something every day that scares you, you're not going to grow. Even some of the local Toastmasters, they are putting improv into their teaching. Like a lot of the Toastmasters will have a segment where it is improvised.
I have no doubt, and I think it's probably good. I remember even in high school in the late 70s, in speech class, there was one category called extemporaneous, and you got a topic and you just had to go and persuade or speak about or pontificate on. I don't remember. It was 8th grade, but it's an invaluable talent for public speakers, because there are going to be times where the teleprompter goes down. There are going to be times where it turns into more of a dialogue than a monologue. There are going to be times when you could be delving into a subject and go, I'm losing the audience right now. They're not interested in, mortgage rate analysis right now. They're interested in marketing houses. And you feel the room. You go, you know what? I'm going to pivot. And you have to make that pivot, somewhat seamlessly, or show the seams. But you have to be free enough to make the pivot. And the improvisational person will feel much more comfortable deviating from the expected than the person who's kind of like, it has to be math class perfect. And that's another thing in my classes, and a lot of classes, is we try to get people out of that elementary school thinking of math class perfect, because it's a batting average and it's not going to be math class perfect. And you have to accept that, embrace it, and enjoy it. You're going to have hot nights and hot moments, and you're going to have not so hot nights and not so hot moments.
Have you ever been heckled in an improv? Because I noticed that the audiences always seem to behave during improvisational shows, whereas typically in stand-up shows, there's always at least one heckler. I don't see improvisational actors getting heckled the same way I do stand-up comedians. I don't know if it's because of the lack of liquor or...
I think it's a few factors. Definitely liquor does loosen people up, because we've had hecklers at our Puppet Up show, which, often, there's booze sold, before the show. And then also we're, kind of a naughty show. So people feel licensed. I also empower the audience to be raucous in that show. And they sass me constantly. They take the piss out of me. So does the cast. I'm the whipping boy. And it's really fun, actually. But the difference between stand-up and improv in terms of heckling, usually stand-up, it's one person up there. They're very vulnerable. They're outnumbered by the audience significantly. Once there's like 5 people up there as an improv team, that if you go up against one of them, you've got all of them coming back at you. So the heckler then, therefore, is going to be outnumbered. So it could be just something as simple as that. And also, stand-up comedians have this tacit confidence of, I'm going to hold you for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever, because I'm that funny. Improvisers come in and it's kind of like, we're going to try this. So it may not trigger the jerks quite as much to feel that they have to heckle. But the thing with hecklers is almost all the time, the entire audience in the room is on the side of the performer. And the heckler usually doesn't feel as good about what they've done by the time it's over.
That is funny. So you've been on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Is that a similar experience to performing live at the Groundlings, or because it's television, it's not as true improv as what you're used to performing?
Well, yeah, I did two. I did one Whose Line for England and one for here. Of course, the one I did for England, we shot in LA, so I didn't get to go to England for that. Son of a bitch. But it was a combination. It really was, because for an hour episode or whatever it was of Whose Line, we would overshoot like 3 times that amount, and then they would take the best. But we would do these rehearsals, these very long rehearsals where we worked out, the different improv structures that they did, like their news show or, superhero party or something like that. And so we'd be familiar with those structures when we did them on shoot day in front of the studio audience. But sometimes the suggestions that we rehearsed with came back for what we were doing to be on air on the show. And that skeeved me out as an improviser. I was just like, oh, okay, now what do I do? Like, are the producers telling me that I'm supposed to recreate what we did in rehearsal? Because usually if the suggestion came back, it's because it was very funny in rehearsal. And I feel really gross doing that. So I was in between a rock and a hard place. So that, and then also the fact that it is a TV show, after the audience is gone, you do pickups. They would come and tell you, like, you were standing over here and you said blah, 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 Coca-Cola, and you can't do that, right? So we'd have to reshoot, and I go blah, 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 soft drink. And we, and then they would edit that in. So they would do little improvements and fixes after the fact. But at the end of the day, those, little, peccadillos about Whose Line, it still is the most successful improv show ever on television. And I have to give it to them. They knew how to package it to make it feel immediate, which is one of the things that makes improv not translate to TV very well. It has a you had to be there kind of feel to it. And they succeeded in making that feeling like, you were with these guys that were just messing around in their living room. They got that, and they got it really well. That Dan Patterson did that. So
that's neat. Ellen said, were you the choreographer in an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah, I did a few episodes as Steve, the choreographer. I was supposed to be choreographing the producers, the Broadway version for Larry to join. He was going to perform in it. And it was fun. It was weird though, because I hadn't seen the producers. They didn't have any tape, and it was improv. So I had to make up my own choreography. So all those steps I'm doing in there are just me messing around. And those steps probably have nothing to do with the actual choreography of the producers. Yeah. It's bullshit.
Was it fun working? That's one of my favorite shows of all time. So was it fun working with Larry David?
Oh yeah. I liked it a lot. He's very direct. But I like that. It's his show. I would do a take, and I kept ending this one take with, all right, you guys just rehearse. I'm going to go have some me time. And I said that like on a couple different takes, because we'd rehearse it, or not rehearse it, we'd improvise it and then improvise it again. You'd keep some of what you just did, you'd add new things, whatever. And he says to me between takes, he goes, hey, don't say that me time thing anymore. And he says it with that look on his face, like he just smelled something terrible. He really didn't like it. And I was like, all right, that's easy. I'm thinking like, it's your show. I'm not offended. But there were other guest stars who were like a little thrown by how brusque he could be. And I'm thinking like, this is just a New Yorker who knows what he wants, knows what he doesn't want, and don't take it so personally.
Wow. Did you always want to be an actor growing up?
I did as a little kid. Then I devoted myself to the clarinet. I really got into classical music through junior high and high school. My parents had been actors, so I had, oh, hey, I just realized on the desk here is a picture of my parents in a stage play. Oh, there's too much reflection.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. That's them at Curtain Call in a stage play in Los Angeles in about 1948 for a play called Seven Keys to Baldpate. and it was performed just a block from where you and I have improv classes on Wilshire. Anyway, so senior year of high school, I auditioned for the school musical. I got a fun part in it, and I had been accepted to college already as a biology pre-med major, and over the summer I changed it to theater. So that's how that happened.
Wow. What do you have like a favorite moment for if you were on one of those shows or we were doing This Is Your Life, Patrick, or you were writing your autobiography, do you have one moment in show business that just like for me it was being on the Tonight Show. I don't have the career you did. I have dribs and drabs.
But you have that. I've never done that.
Yeah, that because somebody asked me the other day, like the great, I mean, I'll never forget being on Johnny Carson. It's like when I think of if I need to think of a happy memory.
Friggin' Johnny Carson, AJ.
But I don't have the length and the duration and the kind of experience. I've never been in a movie. I've always wanted to do that. But do you have like, was there one role or one co-star where you're like, God, that was the greatest day or greatest moment of my life in show business?
You know, I don't think so. And I think the only reason I can't isolate it, excuse me, is because I've been really lucky that I've had a career that has taken me all over the place and worked with so many really cool and interesting and sometimes not cool people that I couldn't tell you. I will say that probably being part of the Ellen Coming Out episode that season and episodes leading up to it was probably one of the most significant, milestones in my little career. Yeah.
That's where I first saw you, was on that show. So
oh yeah, with my bright red hair.
You had red hair back there.
I sure did.
Your character was Peter, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Good memory.
That's what I do remember that. I don't know if you watch a lot of Netflix, but I've been watching a show lately called Hollywood. Are you familiar with it?
I haven't started yet. I'm waiting for Andy and I to watch it together. Our schedules have been a little bit off. He's going to bed early these days. Yeah, I want to see it because I've heard mixed things. I've heard it's great, and I've heard like it's awful, and I don't know.
Well, I'm enjoying it. It's my spin bike show, and again, I'm not comparing it to what actually happened in Hollywood because I don't really know. And
it's supposed to be It's supposed to be a fantasy. Those kind of things never would have happened.
But it does seem that pictures have changed. Like for example, this isn't going to ruin it for you, but for example, African Americans weren't leads in the 40s, for example.
No.
So things like that, or some people that were gay could not express themselves as gay back then. So that's
they certainly weren't going to go to an awards show with their, same-sex partner.
Exactly. So things have changed, but I'm wondering, like, it seems like you were talking about Larry David. You have to have a thick skin really to survive in show business.
Either have one or develop one that you can put on when needed. And I think that's what I did. I've never really talked about this in interviews and stuff like that, but I had this gloss of confidence when I went into an audition or went onto set, and probably generally even when I was, to a degree at the Groundlings, although people there saw me, crying out in the alley after a bad show, so they knew the truth. But I would be able to put on this kind of armor and be able to deal with what was thrown at me, which was sometimes really not nice. Sometimes it was really hard. So when I see people getting into the business that are young, I'm like, okay, they'll figure out, if they have to, they'll figure out how to deal with that if that ever happens to them. But yeah, it was like creating a character of Patrick that wasn't me, but was a version of me that could go test for a TV series and be in a very intimidating room of all these executives looking at you like this, like, really, you? And hold my ground and do my bit and go, bye everyone, and look like it was just water off my back. But it was an act. Fake it till you make it, I guess.
It just seems like it would be such a hard way to make a living unless you really loved it. Because when you think about most jobs, I mean, people do change jobs and they sometimes have to interview for jobs, but it's almost like as an actor, you're an audition. It's like every single time, and that has got to be so stressful.
I think it is, and it can be, and then I think you find your way around it. Like the competition element always, like, I just hated it when there were other people in the waiting room that were, kind of mad dogging you, almost like like they were wanting you to go in there and be nervous, like they wanted to make you nervous. I mean, there are people like that, sadly. And so I found early on that my superpower there was to love everyone and bless them and wish the best for them. And my mantra inside was, this one's mine. I'm getting this. I'm totally getting this. And all these other guys that are not getting it today are getting something that is better for them tomorrow. And so the more I kind of just kept thinking like good thoughts for them, I hope they all have a good audition. Nobody messes up. I hope it all, leads to them getting other work with this casting director and this series. I hope they land something that is even better for them tomorrow, but this one is mine. So I would get myself into that mind frame. So when I walked in, I kind of probably gave off the aura like I was owning it. And I didn't have to engage in any of that negative crap, because I sincerely meant what I was thinking about the other people. If you don't, then that's just crap. It was very easy to do. This one's mine, but they're all going to get something so good.
That's just a nice way of being in the world, I think,
Yeah, because every single person has been carrying around their baggage and their shit for as long as they've been alive. Everyone is the star of their own movie, in terms of the one that they have to be in every scene. I don't mean that they're, vain, but you're in every scene of the movie of your life. You're the lead.
I wish I could get an understudy sometimes.
No kidding, right? Oh my God, I really want to stand in sometimes.
Oh my God, I wish like my 20s I could have had an understudy, I'll tell you. They were rough.
Kidding. I'll just be in my spiritual trailer. Goodbye.
Oh my God. Susan says you have such a great life philosophy. Jesse says what Patrick is describing is the essence of bravery. And Elmo says, do you bottle your gloss of confidence? I would buy that.
My what of confidence?
Your gloss of confidence.
Oh, no, but you know what? I think through studying improv is one of the things that really helped me, because, every time you fail, and you don't die and you don't get the flesh-eating bacteria or a compound fracture, every time you just totally bottom out and you're in a supportive group and everyone kind of laughs and goes, oh my God, that was awful. And you're like, I don't know what came over me. And you can laugh at those car crashes. That's empowering. That lets you know, like, you know what? I can survive this. I can survive this. The worst thing that can happen is it's not going to go my way. Big deal. Move on. So that's what has really bolstered that kind of gloss of confidence. At the end of the day, knowing the world is much bigger than me and my little, I want to make you laugh, wasn't I funny kind of need. That's hardly a priority.
When I think back to when I was in acting class, this was 35 years ago, and I cannot think of more than one or two people in hundreds that are like, in show business today, at least in any discernible way, that are successful. Why do so many people, you think, want to get into show business? Do you think it's because they want to be famous, or do you think it's because they just really love the art?
Well, I think both answers are true. And there's probably some people who are just one on that spectrum, and there are most people that are a blend. I will say it's interesting to me that when I was starting out and I was in first year acting school, 18 years old, I knew I wanted it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what fame was. I didn't know what the realities of being a working actor would be. I didn't know what would be required. I didn't know what the ups and downs of it would be, but I knew I wanted it. And that became the focus of my 20s. That's what I want to do. Then I was lucky enough to fit the need of the time. And I was like the go-to guy if you needed a skinny bellhop with bright red hair. If you needed the idiot soda jerk or the hyperactive secretary, whatever. And I fit, so I started working a lot, and I got a modicum of what that 18-year-old me was looking for, including just enough of the fame and just enough of a front row center seat to real fame, watching other people deal with it, that in my 30s, I kind of went, ooh, I don't know if I want what the 18-year-old me wanted, because I don't know that I like what it does to people. And I don't know that I like what you have to do to pay for it. So I began re-evaluating my entire relationship with the career that I'd cornered myself into. I think probably if I went back and looked, I'm ashamed to say, but if I went back and looked at some jobs that I did in sometimes maybe in my 30s and maybe even 40s before I kind of figured out how to do it, I'm sure there's jobs where I didn't do a really good job and I didn't have that joy in it. You know,
Yeah.
I was punching the clock and passing go, and and I and I think that's because it was part of me also that was just like, what the hell am I doing? I don't want to be famous. I've seen what that does. No. And so for me, it had to turn from wanting to be famous more toward loving the craft again. And that's where I'm at now. And I'm lucky that I've had, a few jobs in the last year that I really enjoyed doing. I can say I really genuinely enjoyed doing. And that's enough. That's good.
Yeah. That's just, LM says he has some great insights. I could listen to him all day. Ellen said, did you ever voice any animated characters on any shows?
I did, but Ellen should also talk to my husband because he cannot listen to me all day. Um, no, it's not good. Yeah, I did King of the Hill. I was a dad in the PTA. I did Family Guy, and I don't remember many of the voices I did. I just think I was a pizza parlor manager, and then I was a tree on fire. I'm pretty sure I was a tree on fire. Then I did a series called Fat Girl, which was really fun with April Winchell. And God, there've been others too. I just off the top of my head, I can't remember them.
I see you mostly doing comedic roles. Did you ever do any straight on dramatic roles like Shakespeare or anything like that?
Shakespeare only in college for class, you know. Um, uh, Once I was like pretty much, a comedy guy, Groundlings, sitcoms, and stuff like that. That's what I'd get seen for. I was lucky enough to occasionally get an audition for a drama. Sometimes I had the chops for it and got it. Sometimes I didn't have the chops for it and went to someone else because there are people who devote their entire lives to that type of acting, and that has not been me. So I totally get it. But I did a Criminal Minds a couple seasons ago. Played an adult who was on the spectrum with Asperger's and who'd been framed. That was certainly not comedic. And then in other dramas, I've actually done kind of comic relief, like on Major Crimes, comic relief, Character Suspect, and CSI. I was kind of comic relief. So yeah, the drama thing happens here and there once in a while, and it's always fun when it does.
When I watch award shows, they say, because this isn't really my world, this is your world, but I always wonder what it's really like when they say, oh, it's just an honor to be nominated. Then you watch these award shows and the person that didn't win, you get a close up of their face. And even though they're clapping, they don't look happy that the other person won.
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about the competitive nature of show business. And that's the part that always bothered me, because when you apply for a job, like, I don't know, as a doctor, you're not always, it just, is it really just an honor to be nominated, or does everybody just really want to win?
Well, I don't know because I haven't been nominated.
Well, well, that was going to be my next question. Is there anything on your bucket list in show business? You want an Emmy, you want an Oscar? What would you, is it what, because with your attitude, you could probably manifest it. Just, it's not too late.
Oh, sounds exhausting. Uh, well, I really don't know. I always feel bad for the people on camera. They've taken to kind of cutting away from them quicker. I don't know if you've noticed in the last year. But yeah, the people that didn't win and keeping the camera on them, well, they're just having that moment of possible disappointment, maybe relief, I don't know, or just accepting their new reality. They're no longer, possibly going to win it. They now know that they did not. I was nominated for an Ovation Award for a part I did in a musical about 12 years ago, and went to the Ovation ceremony, and I didn't win. Yeah, and I will say it was an honor to be nominated. It's kind of Cool that I can say I was nominated for that.
Nice, nice. I just always wondered, what I think is so unfair about award shows, when you think about like the Olympics, they're all competing in the same race, but it would be more fair is if they all did the same part and then decide.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to make it like a true competition, but I think the way you have to look at it, because it's so subjective, is it, and they even don't even say the winner is in some award shows now. They'll say the Oscar goes to, or the whatever, because it's an honor. And who they're going to give the honor to is a subjective process. It isn't like a race where it doesn't matter who you are, what country you're from. If you ran fastest and you didn't cheat, you win the gold medal. That's a competition. So there's competitiveness in it, but at the end of the day, it really is, I think, just an honor that they're giving, and then they create this heat around it like it's a competition, basically for publicity. Why else would they do it? The Academy would just decide on who gets the honor and announce the honors. But if you can make a competition out of it with a whole lead-up campaign and get everyone to frenzy out there to watch all the TV shows and see all the movies that are, up for whatever award, then you're creating an event. You're creating an Olympics of sorts, to build on what you said.
Yeah.
So
Colleen says, when I think of how many actors there are, I think it would be an honor to be nominated. And there are a lot of actors. Aren't there something like 80,000 or more actors in the Screen Actors Guild?
Yeah, something like that.
There's
If not
more,
120.
there's more actors than there are parts.
Oh, absolutely, by an astronomical figure. You can't use that to discourage yourself going into it, though, because you have to remember, out of all those thousands of people, there's a lot of them that don't intend to ever act again. There's a lot who have retired. There are a lot of them who are 3 months old or 10 years old. They're not your competition. So you have to really love what you're doing and love the process and love the chance that it's gonna possibly lead to something fun and lead to something remunerative, and that maybe you'll be really lucky and get to make a living doing it. But it's taking a chance.
That's beautiful. Anything on your bucket list that you want to do? You want to direct? What's next for Patrick?
I think I would actually like to play some characters that are a little bit closer to where I am now, as opposed to what I did when I was young. I played a lot of high energy characters. I don't have that energy level now. I don't want that energy level, but I'd like to play, maybe some older academics. I think it'd be fun to play somebody with PhD. Get to wear a lot of tweed blazers.
Oh, I could see you as a professor.
Right?
I know your classes are really not happening right now because of the sheltering, but if somebody, and they're always full even when they are, because I don't even know how to refer people to you if they could take a class, because your classes are pretty much always full. And
yeah, I mean, after all this is done, I may look at starting another class each week. And I think I would like it to be a beginners type, non-actors combined with some actors, but basically people that really just want to learn the principles. And I may do that. I might do it in LA. I might do it out in the desert. I don't know yet. But my Wednesday class has been full up for years, and that's my first priority right now.
wow, I wish I had known about it sooner, because I remember taking a class, and I'm not going to say the person's name online. I'll
Don't.
tell you if you want. No, I wouldn't. Well, they're dead anyway. See, that's what they get for disrespecting me. But this particular improv teacher at this particular school, and I'm brand new, by the way, and I'm doing the scene, and they go, "You suck," and I'm like, okay, but could you be more specific? That is not a good note for an actor. You know what I mean?
That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing to say to another human being. That's not a good thing to say to somebody who's paying you to instruct them.
Right.
And They actually said those 2 words to you.
Yeah, I'll tell you later. I'll text you who
Yeah.
it is, and because they were quite well known. But it's
Oh,
like, and
I
I'm like,
remember.
I know, but
I remember who.
how do I suck? Could you give me something more concrete, like, or tell me how not to suck? But just yelling "you suck," that doesn't help me do
Yeah, you
anything.
know what the yes and to that is in that situation? No, you suck, and I'll take a refund for every class I haven't taken in this course yet.
I know.
Um,
I
thank-
wish I wish I had. It's like when I teach cooking, if somebody makes something and I go, "Oh my God, that tastes terrible," and then just walk away. I can say it's not up to what I think it should be, but then I would give them concrete help as to how to make
Of
it taste
course,
better.
because you want to help people because you're a natural, pedagogue. This person who I remember now who it is, I remember. Sounds like they were just on an ego trip. And also, you would never say to the person who just made, something that's like a dog's breakfast, you wouldn't say you suck to them. You might go, this is problematic. Okay, let's taste it again. Here's what's going on. And you couldn't serve this, and use a little bit of humor and humbleness on your part, but the person who just goes, you suck. That's like an abuser trying to abuse people and finding those people that will come back for more abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have done that. After the class was over, I did not go back to him. And then I found a very nurturing teacher named Joan Darling, who I'm trying to get interviewed for this series. But yeah, so any plans on writing a book? Because here, I've got a title for you, How Not to Suck.
I will not call it that. I will not call it that. Maybe I will someday. I've got some other things I'm doing. I'm taking my music lessons, and
You play the harp. That's pretty unusual.
I play with the harp. Yeah, I would say I can play a little bit. After all these years of kind of diddling with it, I should be a lot better. But I'm having fun, and I'm taking my lessons, and yeah, and who knows? Maybe someday I'll be good enough to play in the corners at International House of Pancakes.
Oh, that's great. Is there a way to people I mean, because I'm not really, other than doing this show, I don't really do much on social media as far as following people, but do you have an Instagram, a Facebook, or anywhere if people like you, they could just
They can message me through Facebook. My patrickbristow.com is down right now. I just haven't gotten around to redoing it, and I'm not on Instagram hardly ever, or even Twitter.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they send, I check unfiltered messages every once in a while.
Nice. Well, this is great. It's so fun talking to you. I wish people could experience, if not you, at least the joy of improv, and not to be so scared, and to try to take, like you say, a basic class, because it really can change your life and make you more present in your own life, with other people, just by the few skills you learn just in some of those simple exercises that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key is find a supportive teacher, a supportive environment. Because otherwise, why are you spending your money? Why are you wasting your time? If you need that coach that's going to yell at you like a football coach, well, wait till you're a very advanced student, or at least intermediate level. And then if you want that kind of teacher, they're out there, trust me.
Yeah.
But start off with nurturing. It should be fun. Let's play.
That's right. Great advice for life. It's such a pleasure talking to you, Patrick. And
It's always a pleasure
I
talking
hope
to you,
I
AJ.
get to see you in person. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please come back tomorrow when we have 2 live shows. At noon, we have Dr. Milton Mills. This will be my first time interviewing him. And at 2 p.m., we have Brad Stolberg, who is a performance coach. So we like to give you a wide variety of things. Any last words, closing improv thoughts?
Don't suck.
That's right. Don't suck. Thank you so much, Patrick. Take care.
Bye, everybody.